She came smiling, a bouquet of bright flowers in one hand, a speech written in soft ink in the other. Her eyes gleamed like forgiveness, and her voice carried the calm warmth of someone who had seen too much pain and came to heal it. "I'm here to help African women," she said. The cameras caught her perfect angles. The babies in her arms smiled wide. She walked through dusty village roads with careful steps, pausing to wave at children, pausing again to whisper hope. And on national TV, she praised President Ibrahim Traoré. "He's giving your youth the courage to dream," she said. The crowd clapped. She bowed gently. The headlines called her a light, a gift, a symbol of partnership. But what they didn't see was this. Behind the kindness, behind the words, behind the smile, was a job. A very different job. Her name was Claire Dubois. Early 30s, blonde, French. She wore sunglasses that cost more than a local teacher's salary. Her accent was polished, her tone always soft. Her mission? Officially, she was the director of Hope Forward, a Western NGO focused on girls' education and women's health. She arrived in Ouagadougou with a calm voice and a curated image. She sat in front of news anchors and spoke about empowering young African women. She donated books and solar lamps. "It's not about politics," she insisted. "It's about people." But it was never just about people. While she posed for photos and handed out gifts, something else was happening, something hidden. Claire wasn't based in Burkina Faso. Her real home was in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire. Her real connections weren't with rural schools or local nurses, but with a network that operated far beyond the reach of compassion. At night, in quiet hotel rooms, her voice changed. Encrypted calls, 2 phones, one for public relations, the other for security. She asked strange questions, too specific, too military. "Where's the nearest base? Do your soldiers rotate shifts here often? Has Burkina Faso received any new drones?" No one asked why she needed to know. After all, she gave out free supplies. She smiled. She was fluent. She looked clean. But in one village, a woman leaned close to her chief and whispered, "She's not here to help. She's looking for something." Burkina Faso's intelligence services had already flagged her. They were watching quietly. They had traced her NGO's funding to a so-called research initiative backed by an American foundation with known surveillance interests. They saw the emails. They traced the IPs, French servers, encrypted files with code names like Phase Orange and Tax Zone. But still, President Traoré didn't act. Not yet. He said something cold, something calculated. Let her work. The more she believes she's winning, the clearer her mission will become. So she kept smiling, kept filming, kept talking. But her biggest donation wasn't a box of books or a bag of lights. It was the moment she thought she was invisible. It was the night she hit send, the night she smiled to herself. Because what she didn't know, what no one had told her, was that her laptop had been mirrored from the first day, and the moment she thought she had fooled an entire nation and the trap was already closed. At first, Claire Dubois was exactly what everyone wanted her to be. Polished, poised, charismatic without trying too hard. She arrived in Burkina Faso not with demands, but with donations, suitcases filled with books, solar lamps, menstrual, health kits, and letters from Western schoolchildren wishing African girls a better future. Her NGO, Hope Forward, presented itself as a bright thread in the global tapestry of development. Their mission? Uplifting women and girls in the Sahel through education, health access, and opportunity. She visited classrooms where children sat on cracked wooden benches and handed out colorful school supplies. She stood beside midwives at rural clinics, listening attentively as they explained shortages in medicine. She knelt in marketplaces to speak with vendors, taking selfies with women selling tomatoes under the heat of tin roofs. At every stop, she smiled with practiced grace, capturing each moment for social media posts that would be reshared by embassies, Western NGOs, and African ministries alike. Claire quickly became a darling of the media, State television aired her interviews in prime time. She spoke slowly and deliberately, praising Burkina Faso as a rising hope in West Africa. She singled out President Ibrahim Traoré for his vision and courage. "It's rare to find leadership this invested in the dreams of its youth," she said, her voice steady, almost reverent. The sound bites went viral. Her videos were subtitled in French, English, and even Arabic. Some called her Madame Partnership. Others dubbed her the new face of African development. But not everything was what it seemed. She moved fast. Too fast. Within just 10 days, Claire had visited 9 villages spread across 3 regions. An impressive feat, especially given the difficulty of travel in Burkina's terrain. But if anyone had paid close attention to her itinerary, they would have noticed something odd. Every location she chose was within kilometers of strategic assets, military bases, drone towers, or oil depots. When asked, she simply replied, "We go where help is needed most." Her smile never cracked. She traveled with a man, tall, dark suit, sunglasses, even indoors. He never gave his name. When asked who he was, Claire would laugh softly and say, "That's just my media officer. He handles the boring stuff." But no one ever saw him take notes. He rarely spoke. He never recorded interviews. And he always stood just close enough to hear, without ever joining the conversation. Her tech setup also raised quiet eyebrows. 2 phones. One always in view. She used it for photos, for calling drivers, for posting updates. The other, smaller, kept hidden inside her crossbody bag, only taken out in the privacy of her hotel room. That second phone, some noticed, never rang. She used it only late at night, speaking in short bursts, always in French and always sounding different, less kind. More business. Some locals began to talk. In Zinieré, a school principal told a colleague, "She's kind, yes, but why does she ask how far the army base is from here?" In Koudougou, a health worker said she asked how many soldiers guarded the nearby fuel depot. In Kaya, a market woman claimed Claire wanted to know how frequently drones flew overhead. And in Gawa, where Claire donated books to a girls' literacy program, she asked the program coordinator a peculiar question. If someone were driving here from the north, how long would it take to reach the border, without checkpoints? Still, Claire gave gifts, and the gifts spoke louder than suspicion. People want to believe in goodness, especially when it's dressed in empathy. Especially when it arrives with cameras. But even cameras can't hide patterns forever. Her emails, those she sent publicly, always sounded enthusiastic, full of buzzwords: community engagement, empowerment through education, grassroots progress. But Burkinabe intelligence had intercepted other emails. Not the ones sent to donors or journalists. The hidden ones. The ones routed through French IP addresses, filled with vague language and strange code names. Phase Orange, Tax Zone, Cultural. Research.1 file was labeled BF West Routes Exposed. Another said, "Use school visits for visual confirmation, minimal resistance expected." These weren't fundraising reports. These were mission updates. President Traoré saw them. He didn't flinch, he didn't react. Instead, he gave an order no one expected. Let her keep going. And so Claire kept moving, smiling, donating, gathering. She seemed tireless, always on the move, always in the right place at the right time. But her timing wasn't luck. It was coordination. She visited a village the morning after a government convoy passed through it. She toured a school near a military radio tower just hours before it was upgraded. When she claimed these visits were random, her excuses were accepted. She was, after all, just a woman trying to help. But one woman, an old matriarch in a quiet, northern village, saw something no one else did. "She looks like hope," the woman whispered to a local chief. "But she asks like a soldier." The chief nodded slowly. He didn't report it. He didn't need to, because Claire was already being watched. Every movement, every message, every smile. And in the halls of Burkina Faso's intelligence office, each of her actions was being catalogued, not as charity, but as reconnaissance. She thought she was undercover. She had no idea she was the one being monitored. What she called hope forward was moving her closer and closer toward the moment her real job would be exposed. By her third week in Burkina Faso, Claire Dubois had become nearly untouchable. Her face was everywhere: state television, morning radio, embassy newsletters, Instagram stories tagged with "Rise, Hope Forward." Ministers shook her hand. Schoolgirls posed beside her holding signs that read, "Africa First, Women Always." Local journalists repeated her talking points with admiration. This woman is doing what governments haven't. She brings light, literally and figuratively. But beneath the smiles, the real work had begun. 9 villages, 7 days. That's how fast she moved. But not randomly, not for show. Each village had something in common: proximity to military infrastructure. One near a drone command post, another beside an oil supply line, a third sitting just kilometers from a new border surveillance outpost. No one connected the dots except for the people watching her behind the curtain. She told local chiefs she was checking on field progress, asked to see how the community was adapting to new development tools. But she didn't ask about textbooks or clinics. She asked questions like, "Where do your sons go if they want to join the army?" Or, "When do trucks usually come through this area at night?" She asked, smiled, and walked away. But at night, back in her hotel room in downtown Ouagadougou, the smile dropped. Curtains drawn, laptop open, 2 screens, one showing field notes, the other a detailed satellite image of Burkina Faso. Slowly, she began clicking. Red circles appeared, one near Fada, another near Kaya, another deep in the west. She zoomed in, labeled each zone in a neat coded shorthand. BFRD West, Low R, Vehicle Zone 3. She didn't title the file something forgettable. She named it BF Field Access V2 PDF, the second version, a refined draft, a precision tool, and then she sent it, attached to a single email, no body text, just one word in the subject line: Melvin, the server? Not in France, not in the US. It was traced to a NATO-linked network node in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire. She closed her laptop, exhaled slowly, and smiled. She thought no one had seen. But everything she typed, every keystroke, every mouse click was already being recorded. Her laptop had been mirrored since the second night she arrived. What she thought was a clean device had been compromised by Burkina Faso's counterintelligence. And the moment she hit send, a mirror copy of her email pinged on a secure line. Inside the presidential compound, President Ibrahim Traoré was in a private office when it arrived. He didn't speak. He simply studied the map, one hand on the desk, one finger scrolling slowly. Each red circle told him a story. Every coded label confirmed what his team had suspected. She wasn't mapping progress. She was plotting points. Each location wasn't a project. It was a vulnerability. He picked up the phone and issued a quiet directive. Let her keep going. She just confirmed everything. The next morning, Claire was at a breakfast press briefing with international reporters. She wore white, elegant, professional, spotless. She opened with gratitude. Burkina Faso is a rising hope in the region. The people here have welcomed me with such warmth. A few journalists nodded. Others sipped coffee. When one local reporter asked, "Why is Hope Forward only operating in military-adjacent areas?" Claire laughed gently and said, "Pure coincidence. We just go where help is needed." That same morning, presidential security conducted a quiet sweep of Claire's hotel room while she was out. They moved carefully, precisely, not touching more than they had to. In her toiletry bag, inside a tube of bright red lipstick, they found a USB drive. But not just any USB. Inside, high-resolution satellite imagery of military movement patterns, drone flight schedules, oil transport logs, names of convoy drivers, a file titled Cultural Zones for Civilian Buffer, another, Com Vehicle Logs, BF West. This was no longer charity. This was espionage. President Traoré could have had her arrested immediately. No press, no fanfare. But he didn't want silence. He wanted something bigger. Exposure. So, an invitation was sent. Formal, respectful, printed on presidential letterhead. You are cordially invited to speak at the National Conference on African Sovereignty as a guest of honor. Claire accepted. Why? Wouldn't she? She had no idea the walls were already closing in. To her, this was the pinnacle of success. She imagined herself on stage receiving applause, perhaps another headline in Le Monde. French NGO leader champions Africa's future. She rehearsed a speech about trust and partnership, carefully weaving in phrases like mutual respect, global solidarity, and new beginnings. She even picked out a colorful African print dress. The same cameras that had once captured her holding babies would now catch her holding a microphone. This time, on a national stage. She still thought she was winning. But she didn't realize she had already lost, and across the country in intelligence rooms and government halls no one was rushing. They were simply waiting for her to walk herself into the final scene. She had drawn a map of access. But what she didn't see was the map of her own downfall. She thought it was a victory. The invitation had come printed on gold-trimmed stationery bearing the seal of the presidency. It was formal, almost royal in its tone. You are cordially invited to speak as guest of honor at the National Conference on African Sovereignty. Claire's eyes had widened when she read it. She smiled to herself, a slow, quiet grin. To her, this wasn't just an event. It was a crowning moment. Recognition. Validation. Proof that all her efforts had worked. She didn't know it was a trap. She spent the evening before rehearsing her speech, adjusting intonation, testing lines. Partnership is built on love, truth and trust, she repeated in front of the mirror, pressing her hands gently against her chest to convey sincerity. Her media officer stood silently nearby, offering no suggestions. He didn't need to. Everything was already in motion. The next morning, the sun rose over Ouagadougou with a golden calm, as if even the skies were holding their breath. Security surrounded the National Assembly building. Cameramen tested their angles. Diplomats arrived in convoys. Students in uniform waved flags. Inside, rows of seats filled with government officials, NGO representatives, and reporters from Al Jazeera, the BBC and Le Monde. And then came Claire. She stepped from her car like a dignitary. A colorful African wax print dress hugged her frame. She waved like a diplomat, smiling, radiant. Cameras flashed, children clapped. Her confidence was absolute, and entirely misplaced. A massive banner hung above the conference hall stage. African. Sovereignty, our voice, our future. Claire took her seat in the front row, nodding to everyone with perfect poise. The session was structured around closing remarks. She was listed last, a finale. The room buzzed with anticipation, not because of her speech, but because of what was coming. She had no idea. When her name was called, Claire rose gracefully. She stepped onto the stage, adjusted the mic, and began with a smile. Burkina Faso is a shining light. I have walked its villages, spoken to its women, seen its hope. Polite applause followed. Nothing thunderous, just enough to be diplomatic. She continued, we, the global community, are not here to control. We are here to serve. We are your friends. And that was when it began to shift. From the third row, a man stood, quietly, calmly, President Ibrahim Traoré. He didn't wave. He didn't take the podium. He simply walked forward and the moderator stepped aside. The hall fell into absolute silence. Then, in a low voice filled with gravity, Traoré spoke. Madame Claire, you speak of trust. Would you trust us enough to answer a few questions live? Claire hesitated, blinking. Her smile twitched. Of course, she said, attempting a nervous laugh. The cameras didn't laugh. The crowd didn't move. Only the silence deepened. Behind her, a massive screen flickered to life. Field access v2.pdf. Her eyes darted up. Her breath caught. It was the map, her map. the red-circled, military-dense layout she had quietly built in her hotel room. Displayed, now blown across the stage in horrifying clarity. The audience gasped. A rustle moved through the room like wind before a storm. Journalists leaned forward. Ministers narrowed their eyes. Villagers in the back row stood on tiptoes. Claire turned slowly, trying to breathe. Traoré's voice cut through the tension. "Do you recognize this file, madame?" She stammered. I'm not sure where that came from." He didn't interrupt. Instead, another file appeared. An email. From Claire Dubois, hopeforward.org subject. Phase orange, tracking comm vehicles. Body BF West, routes exposed. Minimal resistance from volunteers. Use school visits for visual confirmation. Mission continues. Her own words. Someone in the crowd shouted, "She was spying on the army." Another voice, a woman, said louder, "She used our children as cover." Claire's hands began to tremble. She shook her head. "This isn't what it looks like. I was only gathering data." For fundraising, Traoré turned to the audience. "We cloned her devices," he said quietly. "Every file, every message. We traced her instructions from Abidjan to a NATO-linked office operating under the title Cultural Research Desk." Gasps filled the hall. One older woman near the back whispered, "She took pictures of my daughter." A student shook his head in disbelief. "And we welcomed her." Claire's voice broke. Her tears came fast. "Please," she said, "can we talk in private? Not like this. Please, not like this." But the president didn't respond. He stepped aside slowly as two plain-clothed officers walked onto the stage. They didn't touch her. They didn't raise their voices. They simply stood, beside her, not behind her, waiting. And in that still moment, nothing moved. Not the crowd, not the cameras, not even Claire, until Traoré turned back to the audience and said, "They send soft faces now, kind eyes, clean hands, and clever names. But beneath them are the same old plans." Claire dropped the microphone. It echoed across the room. The sound of finality. As the officers gently escorted her off stage, a girl near the front cried, not because she supported Claire, but because she had believed her. "She said she was one of us," the girl whispered. But she wasn't. And now the world knows. By sunrise, the footage had spread across the continent. Twitter, TikTok, WhatsApp, BBC, Al Jazeera. Headlines screamed, "Traoré exposes foreign operative masquerading as charity CEO." Some tried to spin it. A French newspaper called it a misunderstanding. A US-based NGO insisted it was just data gathering. But no one could explain the lipstick USB. No one could explain the military coordinates. No one could explain Phase Orange, because there was no explanation left, only truth. And now the entire world had seen it. Not through war or violence, but through the precision of calm, public reckoning. The video exploded. By morning it had spread from Ouagadougou to Johannesburg, from Nairobi to Paris. The clip of Claire Dubois standing frozen on stage, her classified map glowing behind her like a scarlet confession, was everywhere. Subtitled, translated, reposted. It became a symbol, not just of betrayal but of awakening. What caught fire the fastest was not the evidence itself. It was a single line. "They send soft faces now." That sentence, spoken by President Traoré in a voice both calm and cold, became a continental slogan overnight. Teens spray-painted it on campus walls. Artists turned it into murals. Claire's face split in half. One side smiling with flowers, the other dark, eyes watching. Activists stitched the phrase into protest banners from Dakar to Dar es Salaam. WhatsApp groups renamed themselves Unforgiven Watch. TikTok creators reenacted the press conference using subtitles and somber music. Even Western news anchors, once skeptical, began asking deeper questions. The backlash stunned European diplomats. French media outlets scrambled to explain. A well-known Paris columnist wrote, "Claire Dubois may have crossed a line, but she meant well." That defense backfired. African youth quoted it with rage. She meant well, while mapping our defenses. Meanwhile, a US-based NGO that had quietly partnered with Hope Forward issued a statement suggesting Claire was conducting field assessments for international monitoring. But the internet wasn't buying it. The lipstick USB, the emails, the drone flight data, they had already been seen, shared, burned into memory. In the capital of Côte d'Ivoire, a secure line buzzed. President Alassane Ouattara called directly. His voice was formal, low. Excellency, we ask that this matter be treated with diplomacy. Claire holds cross-border ties. Let us handle it, quietly. President Ibrahim Traoré didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. She sent sensitive intelligence from your capital, he replied, to parties in Paris and Washington. She stood in our villages with lies in her pocket. You may handle your guests as you see fit. But in Burkina Faso, traitors are handled one way, with justice. Silence. Then a colder answer from Ouattara. In that case, we may need to rethink cooperation. Traoré didn't blink. If cooperation means swallowing betrayal, he said, then Burkina Faso will go hungry instead. He hung up. France tried next. Their ambassador requested a private meeting. Quiet resolution, they said. No cameras. Again, Traoré declined. He walked to the National Press Center instead and gave one of the shortest speeches of his presidency. They ask us to forget. They ask us to forgive. But they never ask what it costs us when their operatives sit in our homes, shake our hands, and send our secrets across oceans. In the crowd sat mothers from the villages Claire had visited, students she photographed, children who once smiled for her lens. One woman stood and said, "Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for protecting our trust." Meanwhile, Claire Dubois was no longer the face of anything. She sat alone in a gray-walled room just outside the capital. No press, no speeches, no defense, just silence. Her laptop confiscated. Her mission collapsed, her identity rewritten by truth. She never released a statement. No embassy dared claim her publicly. By the third day, the internet had moved, on from outrage to art. In universities, students organized events titled, "They used to send soldiers. Now they send smiles." In cafes, spoken-word poets performed verses about betrayal in suits. In local churches, priests delivered sermons on false prophets disguised as friends. And in the quiet halls of government, no celebration took place. Only resolve. Burkina Faso had not won with force. They had won with exposure, with patience, with truth. And as the country moved forward, it moved not in anger, but in strength. Not softer, but sharper. And in another capital, another NGO prepares to land. Same smile, new plan. But this time, Africa is watching. Stay tuned for part 2. The next smile they send.